Today is a joyous day in the life of the St. Andrew's community as we gather together to baptize Chase and to hold his entire family in prayer. It's also the third Sunday after the Epiphany, and the gospel lesson appointed for today is rather fitting for a baptism, with Jesus' invitation to follow me. There are three main points from the gospel lesson I'd like to focus on today. The first is about vocational discernment, or figuring out what we're meant to do with our lives. In our story, we have Simon, Andrew, James, and John, who were all fishermen. Of course, there's nothing wrong with being fishermen, and we have nothing to tell us that they weren't at least somewhat competent in that profession. Presumably, it provided enough for them and their families to get by, and it, of course, provided a necessary service for their community as well. In other words, these four fishermen, they have a good vocation. And yet, in this story, Jesus invites them to reflect on it. As it turns out, being fishermen was not their deepest calling in life. Or perhaps it used to be, but no longer is after they encounter Jesus. Their calling changed, and their ears and their minds and their hearts were open to hear the invitation to reflection that Jesus offers. And they decide on that day that they now have a different purpose. Perhaps no better or no worse than fishing, but rather the importance lies in being able to tell the difference and respond to it. They will now follow Jesus, and with him, fish for people. Now, on a lighter note, you'll have to indulge me. I was talking with a friend this week about today's readings. She explained how when she was growing up, she always heard the verse, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people," with the word fish not as the verb, but as a noun. In other words, Jesus, in her mind as a child, literally was turning those fishermen into fish for the people, as in fish for people to eat. My friend is now a scholar who is proficient in Greek, and she assures me that fish in the original text was in fact not a noun, but was a verb. We were both laughing so hard about this play on words and how a small shift in just one word can really change the meaning of an entire sentence. And yet, even in the humor of this, there's still a nugget of truth, which is a bit metaphorical, that Jesus, in some sense, does indeed turn each of us into fish for the people. In other words, like fish, we are to nourish and build up others, which is part of our deepest vocational call as Christians. Just as Jesus describes himself as the bread of life, offering himself for others, so too may we be fish, nourishing others for the sake of Christ. We are to be Christ for others, and we are to be Christ in all that we do. Harley and Scott, you are to be as fish for Chase, to nourish him from the riches of your knowledge of the love of God, to feed him by demonstrating God's love, forgiveness, mercy, and hospitality, so that he too may come to know something of God's grace and love and mercy that the two of you have I know come to know. And that invitation extends beyond just the two of you to all of us gathered here, and indeed to the Church universal. We are to be nourishment to each other, to encourage each other, to sustain each other. The second point I'd like to offer is about the nets, and in it, a lesson about the present and the future of the church. We read that James and John are mending their fishing nets, and that's a logical thing to do. If the nets are torn, the fish will swim right out. In this case, imagine that the nets are the place meant to gather us all in. It isn't a perfect image. We, of course, aren't trapped here like the fish are. Rather, hopefully, the church, and what the church is all about, is big enough and strong enough and compelling enough that we wish to stay inside of it, even if there are tears where we could swim right out. But what if fishing with nets isn't the best way to catch fish anymore? Or what if the tears in those nets are so bad that it might be time to toss the nets into the dumpster and buy new nets? Or perhaps to try a new way of fishing altogether. Or maybe the torn nets can be salvaged, but only the good parts. And we must cut off the bad parts, or cut them back, and then move forward with what is still good. My wondering is an invitation to reflect on the nature of what we do as church, how we catch and how we keep fish. Is it working? Might there be more effective ways of doing it, yet still staying true to the nature of what we are doing, catching fish and being fish for others? Which is to say, being the church as the church has always been for 2,000 years, perhaps in a different way. My final point, and perhaps the most important point, is this. Too often when we hear this passage, we get ourselves worked up and anxious about the need to go fish. We think that it's all up to us, that we have to figure it out and do it ourselves. But that's not what the passage says. The passage says, Jesus says, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." The command here is not to fish. The command is to follow me. Jesus will take care of the rest. And this is a very good lesson to all of us as the church. I can tell you what I see as a priest, and I'd be willing to bet a substantial amount of money that what I'm about to say will also ring true to folks on the vestry. So often we get ourselves worked up, thinking 10 steps ahead about the what ifs of everything, to the point where we get paralyzed, even unable to act. Of course, planning, having a vision, thinking through things, those are all very important. We know that. And yet our task is always simply to take the next faithful step, and then the next one, and then the next one. And don't obsess over how you're going to catch the fish. The command is not to catch the fish. The command is to follow Jesus. And together, Jesus and you will figure out how to catch the fish. I will make you fish for people. So to the vestry, to Carly and Scott and Baby Chase, and I suppose to all of us, what is that next faithful step you need to make in following Jesus? Follow me, and I will make you fish for people.